Is batshit crazy. I have 3 TikTok accounts with 500,000 followers talking about human rights and women's health, and this is how they want to summarize me. And the NDP threw me under the bus. They invited me on.
I don't often call for the public resignation of political staffers. In fact, I've never done it before. But it's 2025, it's a year for firsts, and a lot of stupidity. So here we go. I am publicly calling for the resignation of NDP spokesperson and party insider Anne McGrath. Recently, a TikTok creator, Jessica Wetz, was supposed to be working with the NDP campaign, which, given how bad of a job the federal NDP has been doing in this election season, they can probably use all the help they can get. Polling shows overwhelmingly that the people who normally support you are swinging toward Carney. When you get out there and you do your best Pierre Bataller impression, it's not making anyone think that the federal NDP are trustworthy right now. And to be clear, the only party I've ever voted for federally that I can remember is the NDP. There's a small chance that I may have voted conservative shortly after becoming an adult, but in fairness to me, I was so far in the closet that it was always winter but never Christmas. But I don't think that I actually did vote in that election. Anyway, back to Anne McGrath. The NDP decided to give Jessica the boot after right-wing trolls decided to attack her because, horror of all horrors, she made a video on a naughty platform for only specific people, let's call them fans, who were willing to pay money in order to watch her enjoy the sort of thing that I assume straight people enjoy. It does nothing for me. I have no idea why anyone would pay for that sort of thing when the guys from Two Guys and Some Land have an account on there, which I must not spend money I don't have on. Now, of course, Anne McGrath couldn't say they were throwing Jessica under the bus they'd invited her on because of her being a lady of the internet. That would tick off both feminists and straight men and mean that the NDP would be left with, who? Fiscal conservatives who are worried about going blind if they're happy? So instead, the excuse that Anne McGrath came up with was, and I quote, "We disagree with the comparison that was made. Nothing should be compared to the Holocaust. Doing so minimizes the scale and horror of that genocide and disrespects the memory of the 6 million Jews and millions of others who were murdered. This individual will not be participating in future campaign events. We do not vet every creator we speak to, but we are reviewing how we engage with online voices to ensure alignment with our values." So, what values does the federal NDP have? Because apparently the NDP want nothing to do with any creators who acknowledge that the Israeli government's violent multi-year decimation of the homes and lives of 2 million people living in Gaza can easily be compared to the Holocaust. Because if 6 million Jews weren't dying, apparently, we are not allowed to complain. The rich bastards apparently get to kill 6 million people before anyone's allowed to complain. And I think those 6 million might just have to be Jewish again. Apparently they can't just be Semitic but with foreskin. The NDP just won't give a fuck otherwise. Let's take a second to look at the etymology of the word Holocaust, because I have a degree in this sort of thing. Actually, before we get to that, soon after World War II, the Jews referred to what we now call the Holocaust as, forgive my pronunciation, Horban, which was the same word used to describe the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. Later, the word Holocaust was chosen, adapting it from the Greek holocauston, which was a translation of the Hebrew olah, which was the word used for a whole burnt offering. Now, if you're a recovering theology nerd like me, you might know that the whole burnt offering in Judaism was done under the belief that by burning something so completely, you would be making it of no use to anyone but God. So it was a way of giving that thing over to God, to truly sacrifice it to God, which is impressive since Anne McGrath found a way to use it as a political talking point. Maybe it wasn't a wholly burnt offering after all. Good job, Anne. By the way, are we still not allowed to compare anything to the Holocaust if it only included the 15,000 gay men who were sent off to the camps? Was that okay according to the NDP's current standards? Because I would like to think that working to eradicate 15,000 gay men would be reprehensible. Because I do not have that many exes. And to be clear, Israel has already snuffed out the lives of 50,000 Palestinians in Gaza. The IDF has kidnapped Palestinian men and tortured them by inserting an electrified rod, you can guess where, inside of them to torture them. How many people does Israel get to steal the breath of life from before they lose their free pass and before the federal NDP grows a conscience? To ensure that I can never work with the federal NDP for as long as Anne McGrath is involved, here are some other things that all compare to the Holocaust. Anne McGrath in this picture. She does look like the lady who played a Slitheen during Christopher Eccleston's run as the Doctor, but not as bad as the Holocaust. No idea what Hurly Burly was, but probably not as bad as the Holocaust. Also tell us, bad, but not as bad as the Holocaust. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Not particularly great, but definitely not as bad as the Holocaust. The NDP's odds of success in this election, bad, but a very different kind of bad from the Holocaust. You see how none of those comparisons at any point suggested that the systemic mass killing of any people for any reason was ever okay. None of those comparisons ought to have offended a sober-minded individual, because at no point am I suggesting that killing people just because they were Roma, gay, Polish, disabled, black, Jewish, or for any other reason was okay. And incidentally, Jessica's comments did nothing to suggest that the Holocaust was not bad. No, she was holding on to the universally believed truth by everyone, aside from the sort of people who would make us think about her working with the NDP in the first place. She was not suggesting that the Holocaust was not bad or that it didn't happen. She was pointing out that Holocaust 2, Electrified Boogaloo, is also bad, and that it flows out of the same type of equally depraved hearts as those who drove the first Holocaust. Because the difference between the Fuhrer and Bibi is a few decades and a mustache. Every year on November 11th, Canadians utter the phrase, "lest we forget." On that day, we remember the horrors of war, and we remember the sacrifices of our soldiers who fought and died to prevent that kind of hell from reaching our shores, and to free the people caught in it. The fact that the federal NDP can't condemn the ongoing Holocaust in Gaza is a sign that you've forgotten or you never remembered in the first place. At least when the Holocaust was happening, most people in Canada had no idea it was happening, and our political parties weren't avoiding talking about it lest they incur the wrath of rich assholes. If you expect me to believe that the NDP would actually follow through on any of these promises that they're making, maybe stop copying and pasting AIPAC's talking points into your press releases. Because even this simple prairie computer chicken knows that if you need to clean up a mistake, the first thing you do is you sit down that person privately and you say, "Hi, Jessica. I really appreciate what you've done with us so far. I know we didn't ask you about making spicy content. We're going to have to, expand how much vetting we do. But right now, we really need to focus on our well-oiled campaign that has us polling slightly above the PPC. Right now, for us to continue to work with you, our experts who, based on our polling, are shit at their job, believe that our formal connection to you isn't helpful. You're a smart person. I'm sure you understand. I wish politics wasn't such a dirty game. Are you okay? How are you feeling? I feel awful about this. Do you need a Kleenex?" That is how you respectfully cut ties with someone who is hurting you politically. You acknowledge that the game is stupid, you acknowledge their hurt, and you don't legitimize the complaints of the people who would have never voted for you anyway. If somebody with this face on the internet can figure this out, maybe it's time to realize that there's a lot of someones, who are more qualified than you are for your position.